There are few pieces of media more influenced by their adaptations than Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and Mortal Kombat. Elements from MK adaptations working their way into the source material is almost as common as bad continuity, so let's discuss some of it. And no, small nods like Johnny threatening to punch Goro in the balls or Scorpion's movie spear being a crypt item in MK11 don't count. We're only going to discuss plot points, character motivations, and aesthetic decisions here. Given the close proximity of some of this stuff, it is possible that there was a centralised MK Bible that the comics, movie and novel all drew from, but I'm not aware of any such thing, forcing me to conclude either coincidences or the earlier projects inspiring the later ones. The first major adaptation was the comic series by Malibu Comics that ran from 1994 to 95. The biggest influence the comic had was the reclassification of certain neutral characters into servants of Outworld, or at least doing so earlier. Of particular note are Kano, who wouldn't join Shao Kahn until MK3, and Scorpion, who originally never works for Outworld at all, both joining Kahn in between MK1 and 2 in the comic, leading to the movie and later games depicting them as already working for Outworld before the tournament. The Lin Kuei had apparently served Kahn in the past, which influenced Conquest and has since become game canon as of MK 2011. There are smaller details as well, of course, such as Raiden not taking an active part in the tournament, which then carried over into the movie and then the games as of Shaolin monks. A pair of Special Forces members have metal arms, which would later be given to Jax in MK3. Gods of Order and Chaos were introduced, which may have inspired the Order and Chaos realms in 2004's Deception, along with the idea of a dragon man that ruled Outworld before Shao Kahn, possibly inspiring Onaga. Sometimes though, elements don't make their way into the games, but they do influence other adaptations. Malibu was the first to present the idea of Sonya being motivated by a personal vendetta against Kano for murdering her partner, which would be used again in the Jeff Rovin novel, the movie, and the Defenders of the Realm cartoon. The comic introduced Hydro, a blue-clad Lin Kuei who was Sub-Zero's partner until he was killed by Scorpion. Hydro was then featured in MK Legacy as the third cyber ninja who is used as a test dummy for Sector and Cyrax. Poor bugger must be a Green Lantern for how dangerous the colour yellow is to him. Then there's the 1995 movie adaptation that remains the one good video game movie Paul W.S. Anderson ever made. The movie made a few changes to small details that had only been mentioned in the bio section of the MK1 prequel comic. First is Raiden's black hair being changed to white, which then became canon with 2002's Deadly Alliance. And then Trevor Goddard portrayed the American-born Japanese orphan Kano as Australian, which carried over into the cartoon and then became game canon with 2000 Special Forces, along with his particular style of knife. The movie also depicted Scorpion's spear as coming out of his hand, while the games had never been clear on that. Scorpion was often shown carrying his spear, suggesting it was just a weapon he threw or launched from his wrist. A promotional render for Deadly Alliance showed it coming from his hand, and its presence in Shujinko's arsenal in Deception suggests it is a power rather than a tool. Nowadays, it seems to be a wrist-launched tool again though. More significantly, we were given setup for a couple of, well, couples, Liu Kang and Kitana, and Johnny Cage and Sonya Blade. The former became canon in 1998's MK4, though one could read into the Monk's MK3 ending as hinting at the idea. Some fans believe it was inspired by the comic, suggesting a relationship between Kung Lao and Kitana, but I couldn't find any hint of that in the comic. Aside from their motivations becoming more personal through the other's fates, their souls becoming bonded in Armageddon bios, and some banter in MK vs DC Universe, their relationship didn't really get any focus until the in-depth reimagining of the original trilogy in 2011. This game did a serviceable job of establishing their relationship, certainly more so than the horribly contrived Shaolin Monks version, or the suddenly existent classic version. In MK11, this relationship sees the two as King and Queen of the Netherrealm and architects of the new era. It had some more depth to Liu Kang's character, so this influence is definitely a good thing. As for Johnny and Sonya, their relationship is more one-sided until the sequel, where Johnny dying to save Sonya from Kahn is a notable factor in her story. Again, some fans believe this story got its start in the comics, but I couldn't find any strong evidence of that. The games hinted that Johnny had a thing for Sonya in Deadly Alliance, but this dynamic wouldn't get any real focus until 2011, where Johnny's infatuation with her is really the only character-specific motivation for his actions after the first tournament. In MKX though, Sonya does begin to reciprocate, leading to an ill-fated marriage, a new hero in the form of their daughter Cassie, and a nice little bookend to the story from Johnny.
She called me Johnny. She called me Johnny.
This is why the MKX comic presenting their relationship as if they only married because Sonya got pregnant after a one-night stand is so egregious. You do not get,
Johnny Cage is mine.
No,
He's mine.
From "we got together for the kids' sake." Fuck you, comic. On a lighter note, the movie also gave us a long-running debate by claiming that Liu Kang is a descendant of the great Kung Lao, which made its way into the games with Goro's MK4 bio. I've discussed this in the past, so let's move on. Sonya's switch from keeping her hair loose to a ponytail and cap in MK4 may have been inspired by her look in the first film, while her shorter hair in Deadly Alliance may have come from the second film. Raiden being portrayed as a Saki bastard led to this being his characterization in both Conquest and Defenders of the Realm. Johnny's career being in the toilets was expanded upon in both Rebirth and Legacy, and may have influenced his Deadly Alliance story, where he is making the god-awful Mortal Kombat The Death of Johnny Cage. And finally, the movie's events were used as the basis for the depiction of the tournament in the cartoon, despite it not being a direct sequel to the movie. 1996's Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm saw the debut of Quan Chi. John Tobias has confirmed that the character was created for MK Mythologies and MK4, and that the team shared the character's details with the cartoon staff, allowing him to debut a year earlier. It's strange then that his story here has no connection to the game version, and the episode is focused on Nightwolf instead of Sub-Zero. But regardless, this Quan Chi uses magic to turn the heroes against each other, which was later reused for an episode of Conquest. 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation, despite being despised by the fandom, had some influence of its own. The movie makes the baffling revelation that Raiden and Shao Kahn are brothers and the sons of Shinnok. This was actually stated to be the case in Raiden's bio in MK vs DC Universe 11 years later. Luckily, this was one of that game's retcons that didn't carry over into the NetherRealm era. In addition to Annihilation, the movie had another continuation in the prequel TV series Mortal Kombat Conquest from 98 to 99. Some of these influences are a little more debatable, but I don't think anyone will argue that the unholy alliance between Quan Chi and Shang Tsung didn't directly inspire the deadly alliance of Quan Chi and Shang Tsung 4 years later. The ones that are a little more debatable are the Koreans, a race of warrior women that are grown in a beehive that may have inspired the Kaitin, a race of humanoid insects that shouldn't exist. Some apparently believe that Master Cho was some sort of prototype of Bo Rai Cho, despite the only similarities being that they're martial arts masters with Cho in their name. By that reckoning, Bo from the Malibu comics is a prototype of Bo Rai Cho. No, it's a coincidence, shut up. And finally, we have Takeda Takahashi, Scorpion's apprentice from MKX, who is believed to be named after Conquest Takeda, who is Scorpion's host, but both are actually named after the founder of the shared idea who was mentioned on the MK Mythologies website. Conquest did, however, inspire the god-awful pronunciation of his name.
Takeda is no more.
Some might say that 2010's MK Rebirth depicting Jax and Sonya as police instead of military is an influence on MK Legacy, but since it had the same creator, Rebirth can instead be considered a prototype of Legacy. But speaking of Legacy, that series did have its own influence on the source material as well. The show was the first to actually characterize and name Scorpion's wife and son, Kana and Jubei. Yes, I know the Jeff Rovin novel did it first, but he had them as Korean, so it really doesn't count. While MKX would later establish that they are Harumi and Satoshi, the canonical MKX prequel comic bafflingly used the names from Legacy. In fact, the entire scene is actually taken from the show, despite it being very different from the games. Fortunately, despite the comic writer then writing for MK11, it sticks to the official game names for the two. And the final adaptational influence on the source material is, of course, MKX and MK11 drawing influence from fanfiction for their plot and characters.
Sorry.
Johnny Cage.
Yeah. Johnny Cage!
And I'll give you a hand.
Now, is that weird? Because, I mean, you're Johnny Cage. Like, what do your daughters think about you being Johnny Cage? Like,
well, it's funny because at an early age, I mean, they were at a playground. I remember when some kid was picking on Grace and Savannah, and he was like, your mom and dad are gonna die. And and they're kind of going,
they're so mean,
whoa,
those
whoa,
kids.
yeah, and they're little, they're little.
I know.
And then finally Savannah muscles up, kind of a little bulldog, and she goes, hey, she goes, my dad doesn't die. My dad's Johnny Cage. He doesn't die.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
and you know what? She was right, because I hear Johnny Cage might be coming back for Mortal Kombat 3,
Johnny
huh?
Cage, Mortal Kombat 3, they're in sort of legal negotiations and roundabouts. But yeah, I've read the script. It's good.
Yeah.
Great.
Johnny Cage is back, and it's all.
If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then maybe you'd prefer to watch failers talk about some of these adaptations and make goofy jokes about them.